Let me start off by saying that, spoiler alert, the problem here is Disney. The problem is not Rachel Zegler. Just like any other film that flops that has a female or queer or lead of color is not the fault of the individual performer. There's crickets from the right whenever a massive film flops that is directed, starred, produced by white men. Same with a Morbius, okay? Everybody laughs and is like, ha ha, Morbius, what a piece of shit. But it doesn't turn into this really vile, misogynistic, racial, racist, abusive shitstorm that then the company that is responsible too for the failures of their film absolutely lets happen because they are catering to this crowd and because they get to use it as an excuse for why the movie failed. It's not because they made really bad creative decisions. It's not because they've just been fucking phoning it in on these live action remakes. It's because Rachel Zegler is Latina and has been outspoken about Palestine and Donald Trump. So, just a reminder that there are double standards here. Overall, the movie is very bad. It's creatively lackluster. The CGI is a joke. Gal Gadot cannot sing or act or dance to save her life. However, Rachel Zegler is like the only good part of that film because Rachel Zegler is legitimately talented. And so the reviews that I have read take the time to recognize that Rachel is talented, that she has that Disney princess energy, that she is one of the only good things about the film, even though the songs aren't that great, even though the story is bad, even though the film just looks bad, that Rachel is good in it. One of the most scathing reviews that I read, I have to read this to you guys. Because this is the problem. The problem is that these films are bad. The problem is that for the last decade, these live action remakes have lost their luster. That audiences just really aren't that excited by them anymore. And of course, Disney keeps making them because they are completely risk averse, because they are prioritizing sequels, they are prioritizing reboots, franchises. And on the one hand, like last year, Disney had the 3 biggest movies of 2024, which were sequels. But on the other hand, a lot of their seemingly hit films, because they are based on existing IP, actually end up as total duds. But they keep churning them out. And if you look at the last decade, here, this is Screen Rant tracking all of the Disney live action films. If you look at the last decade, the films have gone down and down and down in how they're being reviewed, with like few exceptions. So here you look at the critics score on Rotten Tomatoes, and the scores on average going down. And it's because these films not only have lost their appeal, especially when it's IP that's just not that exciting. Snow White was never going to be that exciting. It's not to say that there aren't little girls, and again, Beach's grandma, who aren't excited by this film, but just as far as the IP of Snow White, no, this was never going to be a $1 billion film, let alone like $100 million film. And if you were to go back in time and change the casting of Rachel Zegler, of course, the outcome would just be a hypothetical, but it would most likely, it would have been the same fucking mess. Because the problem is that these films suck, that they have lost any kind of originality, that they are failing to compare to the original versions, that they are just like copying and pasting these iterations of these remake films, where the crazy thing is that Rachel Zegler got all this shit for talking about how like they're going to modernize Snow White, that she is actually going to be a feminist hero and blah, blah, blah. Do you think Rachel's the first person who has talked about the film that she's starring in as updating the female character to be this way? And do you think this is the first time that Disney has gone that route where they're like, okay, so we have this IP, but it's a little old fashioned. We gotta update some things. We gotta modernize these leads. This is what they've been doing. So this is not something new. This is not Rachel said this and is the only actress to have talked about lead character this way. Also, she didn't write the fucking movie. She just stars in it. Yeah, and then remember when people got their first look at the dwarves and went, holy shit, this looks terrible. These live action movies don't have the same charm and energy as the animated version. Look at The Lion King. Real lions can't portray the same emotions as animated lions can. Yeah, and it's not to say that when these live action films aren't really that great that they also don't make money. There are there are examples here of films like Aladdin, not a very good film, but it still made money. But there are also a lot of instances of films that were critically panned and also flopped at the box office, like Pinocchio. Some Disney remakes are bogged down by poor CGI, casting controversies, plot changes that just don't bode well with viewers. Disney has the impossible task of maintaining the magic that made their movies successful in the first place, while also making enough changes to validate the project's creation. Yeah, and there's just really not a freshness to these films anymore. And honestly, they feel like AI generated slop. They do. So here's the thing about Snow White, though. And the reason that Disney keeps doing these sequels and remakes is because the box office is just one income stream for them. Theatrical release is just one income stream. They will release it on Disney Plus. So people will pay to watch on Disney Plus. They will release Halloween costumes. They will release Snow White Halloween dresses. It could get people to go to Disney. So there's a lot of ways that Disney generates revenue from a live action film. But regardless, the problems are these huge budgets. This is a $270 million film. Movies that are just bad. To sound to not get fancy about it, they're bad movies. They look bad. It's not exciting. People see the trailers and they're like, that looks terrible. They're soulless. Yeah. Imitation Brand, thank you for the 5 months. Skill Cylinder, thank you for 31 months. Star Kid Musicals, thank you for the 5 months. Okay, I want to show you this trailer here. This one. Or not trailer, Jesus. Okay.
I'm going to be brave and say the thing that apparently nobody wants to say. The original Snow White is just not a very good film. It's just not really great. And oh my God, before you get out your pitchforks, yeah, I have an animation degree, okay? I understand and respect the level of artistry that this film achieved. In 1937, it was the very first traditionally animated feature-length film. Walt Disney invented this format and not only changed the world of animation forever, but the entire film industry. Like, yeah, absolutely, it was revolutionary, and it deserves to be studied and remembered on that basis alone. It literally has nothing else going for it. I will elaborate, and of course I have many points. Here's the thing. The idea of people frothing at the mouth because they're so angry about this new version of Snow White, like not living up to the original, is insane to me, because objectively as a character, Snow White has absolutely nothing going on. Why?
Yeah, she's very boring. Okay, when you look at the Disney princess movies, most of the I would say every single Disney princess is more interesting than Snow White.
Why does she have nothing going on? Because the original Snow White fairy tale, as someone who has loved and studied fairy tales pretty extensively, is one of the bleakest and has ultimately pretty much zero charitable interpretations of romanticism or optimism at all. It is one of the fairy tales that is least opportune for adapting into an animated film for children. And here's the thing about...
Right, so this is why I said from the get-go, Snow White was never going to be a commercially successful film because it just doesn't have the same appeal as other remakes do.
Grimm's fairy tales, they're known for being bleak. Everyone knows that the originals are much darker than the Disney like loose adaptations, but a lot of people don't know that they're based on like oral storytelling that happened like before the Brothers Grimm even wrote them down. A lot of those stories were even darker, and the Brothers Grimm did not want to publish them. The original version of this story that they published, it wasn't a stepmother. It was presumably her biological mother, and there are versions that imply that she was jealous of the way her husband, Snow White's father, was interacting with her. So the original story mentions that by the time she's 7, she's more beautiful than her stepmother, and it doesn't really give us a timeline after that. So she's presumably a child, and I think that's why her character is kind of bland and uninteresting. In the original story, not only does her mother, stepmother, whatever you want to call her, yes, send a huntsman into the woods after her to harvest her organs, which she then eats thinking they're her daughters, but little Snow White is a dumbass kid, okay? Even though she knows her stepmother is out to get her and the dwarves are warning her all the time, she 3 times let this woman into her house because she had shiny things and is easily distracted. Obviously, the Disney films are loose adaptations, to put it mildly, and I don't think you need to like strictly adhere to source material to tell a good story. Disney has proven that many times, but I just think it's evident that like the actual original themes of this story were vastly different. Again, I get it. This was incredibly ambitious. It had never been done before, but ultimately I think they decided to remove themes they thought were too mature and replace it with nothing except for maybe scenes of Snow White dancing, which did impress people, so. Am I surprised that Disney chose not to tell a story that essentially amounts to men eat shit and women are forced to cannibalize each other to survive? No, but that's not the point. Honestly, the evil queen is the most interesting character in every version of Snow White, and that I think is the downfall of the 1937 version, is while she is inarguably quite cunty with her like full like head scarf thing that she wears. I don't know, like head wrap. It looks scuba gear kind of y. But I think that that's why a fantastic adaptation of the themes of the source material is like the substance. And when I was watching the original Snow White, I was like, oh, this seems familiar, because it's literally about an aging, beautiful woman that is struggling so much with living under patriarchy and the idea of being replaced that she voluntarily turns herself into an old crone and destroys herself. It's devastating and tragic for her as a character. Snow White is basically a character that's there to serve the plot. Again, in the 1937 version, in every version of this story, Snow White is an uninteresting plot device, essentially. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but what if I don't give a shit about fairy tales, okay? You can't judge a 1937 film by modern narrative and character standards, and I'm not. I'm judging it by the standards of the time. They were incredible.
But that's why it's ridiculous. It just don't even entertain these people who are commenting and talking about how Rachel Zegler is the problem. That woke Rachel Zegler is why woke Snow White is a flop. One, Rachel Zegler was not responsible for the Snow White story. 2, Disney has been doing this with a lot of their remakes, where they modernize the story for today's what a moron unfollowed me. Okay, great. Thanks for stopping by. Disney has been modernizing these stories, and That is part of the problem, in that they are very lazy in how they are doing this. They are not creatively exciting. They are not fresh. Sorry, you guys, that chatter has to go, because they have to go make a tweet about how angry they are about Snow White. So good luck. Good luck, chatter. I wish you well. I'm so sorry that Snow White is not the movie that you wanted it to be. Sleepy said, thank you for the 8 months. So yeah, this is not something that Rachel made the creative decision to do, and therefore is responsible for the writing being terrible, for the songs being just not that great. And I had a third point, but I lost my train of thought.
Incredible women in the 1930s that were making films with incredibly complex female characters. Barbara Stanwyck, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn. I know Snow White was specifically aimed at children, but if you look at Disney's follow-up movies, it seems very clear that they understood the character deficiencies of Snow White pretty quickly. It took them over a decade to make another princess movie, and by the time they did, Cinderella is far more developed as a character than Snow White ever was. There's some lasting imagery in this film, and I do understand why people like it. This video is intentionally inflammatory for fun, even though I do stand by everything I said. But like, I just don't understand why people are like belligerently defensive of this film that I just think is very clearly dated and in a lot of ways unexceptional. I think that there are a lot of exceptional things about its creation, but I think we can be realists in 2025. Do I expect this film to be any better or more accurate or have any more similar themes with the original source material? Absolutely not. No, of course not. But I just don't understand why people care about that.
Here's why they care, because it's culture war shit. That's what it is. Okay. That's what this all is. We are living at a time where we cannot escape this commentary, whether it is a Black actress who's chosen to play the role of Juliet, whether it is a queer storyline in a Disney show, or it's a film that has a female lead. I mean, what was the recent thing? What's that one comic book that like, oh. It's the Black Panther. This is how little I know about comic books. The sister of Black Panther, who is a genius. And what is this comic book called? Shuri? Is that what it is? Where like the chuds, the culture warriors, are all up in arms about this Black female genius Iron Man like superhero, when that's how it's written in the comics. This is how fucking stupid they are. It's not about the actress. No. Ironheart. Yes. So the next thing that now they've seized onto is Ironheart. It's a picture of Ironheart, which I guess they're doing a movie on. And in the original comics, Ironheart is a Black woman. And yet the response to it has been go woke, go broke. The response to it is DEI, even though that is the original source material. But this is what's happening. This is how dumb this moment is. It's a very long moment, but how this culture war has extended to being angry about any casting of any person who's a person of color, who is queer, who is a woman. What sucks is the show is probably going to be bad because it's been delayed for years, but they're going to blame it on woke. Exactly. And like I said at the beginning of this, when a film or a series fails that stars a white guy, we don't start saying go white, good night. We don't start saying go white. Not quite. I'm really stuck on that one still. Okay. That was my original one. But we don't blame white people. We don't blame white men when something has failed. If it's critically and commercially not successful, then it's not. We don't hear the cries to stop putting white people in stuff. Oh, I was going to read you guys this. I forgot to read this line from this review, which I just think is so spot on. It's not so much the clumsy attempts to diffuse the political insensitivity of the original cartoon that sinks the movie. The problems are more fundamental, starting with the fact that this is one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. It has the look of an AI-created migraine and is awash with sentiments so sappy that you rather wish the huntsman would just get over his moral scruples and put us all out of our collective misery. A film made by people with cartoon dollar signs for eyes and not even the tiniest glimmer of art in their souls. Boom. Cartoon dollar signs for eyes and not even the tiniest glimmer of art in their souls. Yow. Yeah. Who wrote this? Wendy Ide. Wendy Ide just cooked Disney's ass. And that's a lot of movies these days, of course. It kind of seems to be that the bigger the budget, the more that we're seeing, the more that we are seeing this. These $200 million films that just are creatively soulless and are bad. So this piece dropped today in Variety. Inside Disney's Snow White fiasco. Death threats, beefed up security, and a social media guru for Rachel Zegler. And on top of that, so what they did, so this is the main piece. And then Variety posted they posted a number of tweets with different headlines, but all directing it to this piece. Okay, here's an example. During the hashtag Snow White drama, death threats towards star Gal Gadot, who's Israeli, spiked, and Disney had to pay for additional security for the mother of four. So I want you to be paying attention to the bias of this journalist, because this is presented as neutral journalism, as reporting on facts, but I think it's very clear that there's actually a bias here against Rachel Zegler. And this piece, this journalistic piece, is to the benefit of Disney, it's to the benefit of Gal Gadot, and is basically a crafty smear piece against Rachel Zegler. The role of a piece like this is to tell you who the enemy is. And the enemy here is Rachel Zegler. Yeah. Did you see this journalist's history? Yes. So what I want to talk about is when we see something that looks like neutral journalism, how we have to understand when there is bias at play. And some of you may be like, oh, well, this seems pretty fucking obvious. Okay. But not everybody will recognize it. This is the same author who put out that piece on Melissa Barrera, who put out a piece on Amber Heard, where she clearly has a goal in smearing actresses who I would say in particular she politically disagrees with. Obviously, the Amber Heard is just, everybody was writing a hit piece. Everybody was part of the smear campaign against Amber Heard. But Melissa and Rachel, two things about the thing about them that is the same is that they are both pro-Palestine. And in Hollywood, unfortunately, there is still there is still not a lot of open support from major talent for Palestine. There is absolutely blacklisting happening in the industry. It's just happening more so behind closed doors than out in the open. When Melissa Barrera was fired by Scream 7, and then there was backlash to that firing, what resulted from that was the power players in Hollywood being like, we gotta be a little bit more secretive of the consequences we are enacting on people who speak out against Israel's genocidal campaign. They are also both Latina women. Yes, that is true. That is true. So what you need to do when you see a piece like this is you have to look and see what else the journalist has done. And you can start to form a picture of what their angle is, what their bias is. She's also written pro-Justin and anti-Blake pieces. Yeah. So what I'm getting from Tatiana Siegel is that she participates in smear campaigns against women who have accused men of sexual abuse and against female actresses of color who are pro-Palestinian. So I'm seeing a trend here. And we're going to get to talking about Variety and all these trade publications and how they are owned by the same media corporation. Okay, so I was looking and seeing all this, all of these various tweets from Variety, and then so I want you to compare this one, okay? And this is all about the same piece. So this one, which clearly is the intent here, is to paint Gal Gadot as a victim. Oh my gosh, poor Gal Gadot. All these death threats. Disney had to pay for additional security for the mother of four? Gal Gadot, a mother of four, was facing death threats. And then here, after Rachel Zegler hit the stage at Disney's D23 fan event to introduce the first official trailer for Snow White, she thanks supporters effusively in an X post. 1 minute later, she added an afterthought in the same thread. And always remember, free Palestine. Many inside the studio expressed shock that the Snow White star would commingle the promotion of its $270 million tentpole with any kind of political statement. A Disney executive raised the studio's concerns with Zegler's team, while the film's producer Mark Platt flew to New York to speak directly with her. But Zegler stood her ground and the post remained. I just want to say, for starters, sorry, but this makes her seem super rad. If your intention is to make Rachel seem like a troublemaker, I think that backfired. And I think a lot of people saw this and went, oh, so she's principled? Oh, so she has integrity? Oh, okay, you can never make me hate Rachel Zegler. You're telling me Rachel Zegler, 23 years old, stood up to one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood, the producer of this film, who literally flew to New York to tell her to take her post down, and she said no? Oh, that's kind of iconic behavior. Yeah, never heard of her. Now she's an icon to me. But what I'm pointing out here is that Gal, in the way that I've seen a lot of the reporting around Snow White, there's no mention about like Gal Gadot's controversial support of Israel. Gal Gadot being a propagandist for the Israeli state. And instead, this frames it as death threats towards Gal Gadot, who's Israeli. But remember, she's a mother of four. And in here, it is attempting with this headline to be like, this is why Rachel Zegler has been a problem, to the point that the studio has been struggling to contain her, and the producer had to fly out to deal with her, and she still refused. Yeah. The thing about the major trades, Deadline, Variety, THR, IndieWire, is that they're all owned by the same company, which has no problem spreading a fixed narrative for the right price. The studios could get sneakily away with this before, but not so much anymore. So I want to tell you about I want to tell you about Penske Media Corporation. Who is Penske? What is Penske Media Corporation? Well, Penske Media Corporation is the conglomerate that owns all of these trades. So Variety, which we're going to be taking a closer look at this piece here, is owned by Penske. And Penske was founded by Penske was founded by Roger Penske. Jay Penske is the CEO. He's the current CEO of the conglomerate, but he is the son of billionaire Roger Penske. I thought he was dead. No, he's still alive. Okay, never mind. But you may also know Team Penske because they, if you're into car racing, if you're into, I don't know, any of that, there's Team Penske. Is that our friend Alex Press? Oh, is it? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know how many other Alex Presses there are. But yeah, Team Penske is a professional auto racing organization. So they got a lot of money. They got a lot of money. And the son of billionaire Roger Penske, Jay Penske, is the CEO of this conglomerate. And back in, let's see, when was this from? This was October of 2023. So specifically 10/27/2023. Jay Penske fired David Velasco, who was the editor-in-chief of one of his new properties, Artforum, and the reason that he did that was because David Velasco, who had worked at Artforum for 18 years, published a letter signed by thousands of artists calling for a ceasefire in the face of Israel's onslaught against the Gaza Strip. Apparently publishing artists' concerns about violence against civilians, what one might describe as an airing of those concerns in some sort of forum, was not actually Velasco's job. So he was fired for publishing this letter where artists were calling for a ceasefire. He was fired by Jay Penske, who is the CEO of Penske Media Corporation, who owns many publications, including Variety. So this is the type of stuff you have to be looking at to understand what bias you can identify in media. So you look to see, okay, who owns this publication? What is the main media company that owns all of these? Who is the journalist? What else have they written? And so how is this piece being framed? Gal Gadot reportedly received many death threats that made Disney pay for additional security. One insider somehow blames Rachel Zegler, saying she didn't understand the repercussions of supporting Palestine as far as what that meant for the film, for Gal, or anyone. And again, if you're seeing everything framed this way, then it makes it seem like Rachel Zegler is the problem. But maybe we should stop and go, I wonder if Rachel Zegler got death threats, because she has, and she's talked about it. There were groups of people that would stalk her outside of her apartment, and she would have to hide. Do we think Disney was paying for additional security for her? Do we think that is there any reporting about that? I don't see it. And then on top of it, she didn't understand the repercussions of supporting Palestine. What this does is it makes it seem as if Rachel's support for Palestine led to these death threats for Gal Gadot. And in a way, then tying this all into support for Palestine is anti-Semitic. When you support Palestine, it puts Jewish people at risk.